Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to CTV Sports. I'm Alex Clow.
And I'm Zach Trombetta. We're filling in for Grace and Rachel tonight because they're both feeling a bit under the weather, but we're really excited to talk some sports, so let's get into it.
To start off, the CSU football team got back from Hawaii Sunday afternoon. Players had meetings and a film review on Monday, but Bobo gave them the day off from practice as they begin preparation for Utah State. Bobo held his weekly press conference earlier this afternoon and talked about his expectations against another Mountain West 1-0 team.
1-0 in the conference as well, fighting to get to 2-0 just like we are, and they're at home and we're traveling, so we got to be a mature football team again, have great leadership, from top to bottom, and our players have got to have a good week of practice.
Zach, it should be a pretty interesting weekend as Utah State beat their last two opponents by a pretty significant amount.
No, definitely, and I'm really excited for the matchup this weekend between Jalen Davis, the National Player of the Week, and Michael Gallup from CSU. Jalen Davis scored two touchdowns last week and had 3 interceptions, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens down in Utah.
Definitely will be.
CSU women's soccer hosted the Fresno State Bulldogs yesterday afternoon and finished their match with another disappointing loss. The Rams started off the first half strong as Carly Loderman opened the scoring in the 27th minute by hammering home a cross from teammate Janelle Stone. CSU entered halftime with a 1-0 lead. The Bulldogs responded in the second half with a goal of their own in the 63rd minute from Mayra Delgadillo, her third of the season. Both teams were neck and neck up until the 75th minute when the play was delayed due to rain and lightning. When play resumed, the Rams were unable to match the intensity of the Bulldogs, who broke the 1-1 tie in the 78th minute and added another goal just a minute later to increase the final score to 3-1. CSU's record moves to 2-6-4 on the season. The Rams will travel to Las Vegas, Nevada this Friday to take on the UNLV Rebels.
Women's volleyball traveled to Air Force on Friday and will continue their hot conference play by sweeping the Falcons in 3 sets. The Rams haven't lost a single set since conference play began on September 21st, and the sweep against the Falcons marks their 4th straight in as many contests. The Rams remain ranked at the 24th in the nation with a record of 14-2. CSU continues their conference road trip against Boise State this Thursday and against Utah State on Saturday. The Rams will return to Moby Arena on October 11th, where they will take on San Jose State at 7 p.m.
Former CSU Athletic Director Tom Jurich was placed on administrative leave by the University of Louisville last Wednesday after an FBI investigation into the men's basketball program revealed hundreds of thousands of dollars of bribes to top-level recruits. Under Jurich, Louisville won a men's basketball championship in 2013, which included a victory over CSU in the NCAA tournament. Louisville head coach Rick Pitino was also placed on administrative leave following the investigation into the program. Jurich and Pitino were not among the original 10 men charged with fraud and corruption in the investigation, but more charges are anticipated to be announced in the coming days. Jurich served as the athletic director at CSU from 1994 to 1997.
Although our subject for tonight's show is sports, it is almost impossible to ignore the tragic events that unfolded in Las Vegas last night. The Rams head coach Mike Bobo spoke about the difficult times that this country is currently facing.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the victims in Las Vegas and their families. We woke up like everybody in the country to that news, and it's definitely saddening. Just wanted to let everybody know our prayers and thoughts are with that city and those victims and those families.
Before we take a break, we'd like to take a moment of silence for those affected by the inexcusable violence in Las Vegas. We'll be back with more sports in a moment.
They said I couldn't dream. Called me a piece of trash and swore that's all I'd ever be. Said a bottle couldn't see the ocean. Give up. Go back to the dumpster. But I didn't listen. I made my way. And now I've always wanted to be.
Hello, sports fans. You're watching Tim's Call, and I am your host, Tim McCall. Earlier today, I was able to sit down with Woody Paige from ESPN's Around the Horn. I was able to get Woody's insight on the new on-campus stadium and how it will affect the football program here at CSU.
I came to Colorado in '74, and one of my first columns was about Colorado State. They had a really exciting passing team back in the old Western Athletic Conference. And I just love watching WAC games. And the Mountain West has kind of calmed it down. But back those days, Wyoming threw the ball all the time, Colorado State. BYU was in the old WAC, UTEP. And I always had an affection for the football team. I didn't like the stadium much, so I'm happy about the new stadium. But I got to be friends with a former coach up there who is now, whose name is now on the field. And when he was inducted into the Colorado Sports Hall of Fame, he asked me to introduce him. And that was, you were talking about an honor, that was an honor that I got that opportunity.
There you go. For those who don't know, he's talking about the famous Colorado State football head coach, Sonny Lubick.
Well, if you don't know who he is, then you should be going to Colorado State, and you've never gone to a game because his name is across the field.
Speaking of that new field, Woody, for a non-Power 5 school like Colorado State, what do you think a big on-campus stadium like that that's has all the new technology, is state-of-the-art, what does that mean to a football program?
Yeah, I felt from 40 years ago when I first started watching the team that it was never going to be strategically important to keep playing out there, because the students, that was a chore. It was, if you were coming in from Denver to make that move up I-25, go all the way out to near the dam out there, and I thought it was a tough recruiting place, that people want their football team to be right on campus, like Moby Gym and the basketball team. It's so easy to go to Moby Gym to watch the basketball team. You can go 2 blocks and you can see it. And I think it's been an incredible move, and I'm not so certain that Colorado State is in a position to go to a Power 5 conference, but this could lead to that eventually, because we don't know what the landscape's going to be in college football. But I think what it's going to do is it's going to help the recruiting, it's going to help the attendance, it's going to help the alumni affairs. On every level, it was a major risk by the president of the university, but it's paying off already, I think.
Just in the few games we've been there already, we've already seen more sellouts at this stadium than I ever saw in the old Hughes Stadium. Yeah. And I really think that Colorado State's football program is moving in the right direction because of this. I was also able to talk to Woody about the recent tragedies in Las Vegas and how tragedies like that affect the career of a sports reporter.
In the case of Las Vegas, I tweeted out this morning, don't stick to sports. You can't stick to sports in life. People say, stick to sports. No, we're all humans. I covered 9/11. My newspaper sent me there as a sports writer, and I was there for a week, and I covered it, and I was traumatized going down to ground zero. I covered the Aurora shootings at the theater. I was there that night. I covered Columbine. In those 2 cases, the newspapers, and I was a part of it, won Pulitzer Prizes. So it was totally away from sports because I'm a human first. Las Vegas, I have friends. There's a head of a casino that just down the street from where the tragedy happened. It's a close friend of mine. We've been communicating this morning. We know in Colorado, having seen and witnessed what happened with Columbine, this is the worst human terrorist act. And people go, well, that's not terrorist. They're domestic terrorists. We've seen that, the Oklahoma City bombings that occurred. The trial was here. I covered that. There's domestic terror just like there's international terror. And we got to be aware because, and it's going to be so moving for Las Vegas. That's where people go to have fun. Sports is where people go to have fun. Las Vegas, but every time anybody goes to Las Vegas now, I've stayed at the Mandalay Bay. I was there a couple of years ago. You're going to always think about that. I tweeted out today, I weep for Las Vegas. And I wept this morning. Jesus wept. It's the shortest verse in the Bible. I wept this morning. God wrote me back and said, you didn't weep, and he called me a bunch of names. And I thought, he doesn't understand that sports is my job. Life is my passion and things that happen in life. And I'm totally serious about that. There's a great movie that should have won an Academy Award called Hidden Figures. And it's about 3 African-American women who really helped the space program become what it was. I watched that and I wept, and I don't know that people understand that there are things that are happening in this country now. Young people are seeing events and accusations and division in this country that I haven't seen in 71 years. And I grew up at the end of World War II, through the 50s, through the Vietnam War protest, and I marched then. We've never seen anything like the division that's going on in this country. And then when you add in the natural disasters that have happened in 2 places in the United States and Puerto Rico, which guess what? Those are American citizens. Mm-hmm. When we're seeing what's going on in Europe, and particularly London, where my daughter went to school for a while, and I've gone to Wimbledon and the British Open 25 times, and I've spent a lot of great times in London of what London's going through. Now what Las Vegas, I mean, there's been nothing like this where there are more than 50 people killed and hundreds injured. Orlando, what happened in Orlando? Sandy Hook, the kids there. I don't know the solution. So all the stuff I was talking about what young people should do, young people have got to correct the wrongs that my generation has done and what's happened. And it's a little late for me, although I write about other subjects, it's a little late for me to suddenly become a writer and what kind of effect that, because I was a general columnist for years. And I think it takes everybody saying, we have got to do our own part. When there's a hurricane, when there's a terrorist act, when there's the division between the National Football League and the president, we all have to do what we can to make it better. And even though I'm kidding, you've watched me through 2 TV programs today, different levels, and I'm funny and I'm odd and I'm awful and whatever I might be, but I'm always serious when I step away from the camera. And wish you luck. Thank you for this, and I hope we at least address some of the subjects you want to talk about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me, Woody. It's been a pleasure and an honor. I'm Tim McCall, reporting with CTV News. That's all we have today. Thank you.
Tim McCall. Yeah. Ooh.
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
Sports fans, you're watching the Foco Sports Show. I am your host, Tim McCall, and I'm joined by some of the Rocky Mountain student media members that we have here. You guys want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Brian Buck with KCSU.
I'm Eddie Hers with the Rocky Mountain Collegian.
I'm Nick Baker with KCSU.
So what we're going to start with today, the biggest news of the week, baseball playoffs is finally upon us. That 162-game season has finally come to a close, and the postseason is here. We have wild card matchups this week, and then we're going to get into the divisional round towards the end of the week. What are you guys feeling? Who do you think is the team to watch? Who are you going to win?
Well, starting with the wild card, I'm really excited to see a player who I think has been on the cusp of greatness for a long time, who hasn't quite been nationally recognized because of where he plays, and who hasn't quite had a chance to really step into the spotlight. Paul Goldschmidt. I want to see him step up. I want to see him perform for the Diamondbacks. You know, we talk about who wins the World Series, who can win the World Series, and it takes a complete baseball team. And I think that the Diamondbacks have a complete baseball team. for them to make it, for Paul Goldschmidt to play well, that'll put them on the national stage, that'll put Goldschmidt on the national stage. It's something he deserves. He's one of the most complete players out there, and I'm surprised that he hasn't been in the same conversation as Bryce Harper, Mike Trout, guys like that for the past few seasons.
There's something I love about Paul Goldschmidt. Even when he's not hitting, he's still getting on base. You know, he's just takes the right amount of balls, and he's able to walk when he needs to and get on base. And when you got a guy like J.D. Martinez, who is maybe the hottest player in baseball right now, to drive you in, batting right behind you, I think that really helps, and that's one of the reasons I'm also picking the Diamondbacks. You know, in addition, heading into that NL wildcard game, one thing that I'm looking at, the Rockies, they hit 298 when they're at home, but they hit 248 on the road. And when you're going up against Zach Greinke, a former Cy Young winner, I think you're going to run into problems with a 248 batting average.
Oh, absolutely, and that's going to be a really exciting wildcard game. As you guys mentioned, the Diamondbacks and the Rockies, some good offenses despite the Rockies' troubles on the road. I think overall it's going to be a more exciting postseason than normal. I mean, if you look at it, out of the 10 playoff teams, I see 6 realistic contenders. In the NL, Cubs, Dodgers, Nationals, Diamondbacks. In the AL, the Astros and the Indians. Whether you think the other 4 teams are contenders or not, 6 out of the 10 is a lot. I would say my favorites overall are the Indians and the Cubs. Starting with the AL, I think the Indians, you mentioned complete teams. It's hard to argue that they're not the most complete team in the MLB.
When you win 22 straight games, you're a complete team.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
No, I'm going to completely agree with you there. Like Brian said, a player that hasn't been nationally recognized on the other side of that same wild card game, Charlie Blackmon, a guy who's really come on the scene. He's been a producer for a long time, but no one's known his name until this season when the Rockies are actually winning. One of the most complete leadoff hitters I've seen in my time, probably in history. He's an actual complete player. He's fast, he can field, he can hit, power and contact. Some of the most home runs in it might be the record.
You know, Nick, they've played baseball for almost 150 years, and not a single leadoff hitter in all of baseball history has ever had 100 RBIs until Charlie Blackmon did it this year.
Which is insane. And this is an actual AL East batting lineup. And you know, like you guys said, they do have trouble on the road, and they don't have a great pitching staff. But when you have, you know, a hitter 1 through 8 in the NL that can take you deep, that's impressive. When Luke Roy is batting 8, and that's saying quite a bit.
And you know, even though the team isn't hitting on the road as a whole, as you mentioned before the show, Nolan Arenado is hitting .312 on the road. You know, he is getting the job done, and Charlie Blackmon also getting the job done on the road. You know, if they can just get a couple of these star players to lead them, I think they might be able to make a run if they can get back past the Diamondbacks. I think that's going to be the big test for them.
I'm going to have to disagree with you right there. I think they could beat the Diamondbacks for sure, but I think the Cubs and the Nationals and the Dodgers are just too good right now, especially when it comes to pitching. I mean, the Rockies pitching, especially their bullpen, was shaky in the second half. I mean, the Cubs, Nationals, Dodgers are the 3 ERA leaders in the NL in the second half. In addition, the Cubs had the second most runs in the NL in the second half. I think the Rockies realistically can beat the Diamondbacks, but when it comes to a 7-game series, I don't think you can beat either of those 3 teams 4 times.
I got to disagree with you there. The Dodgers pitching staff over the last month has been atrocious compared to what they were on the season and what they should be.
And it's historically bad in the postseason.
Exactly. Clayton Kershaw, the only knock on him ever has been his postseason performance. When you add a team that still hasn't quite put the pieces back together, and you put pressure on them to perform in clutch situations, you can't do that with pitching.
Oh, you're right.
It's going to damage them. And then you add to the Cubs, they just lost arguably their best pitcher, Jake Arrieta. That weird hamstring injury that was nagging him, he came back for his first appearance since, and it looked like he could hardly walk on his left leg. It was so aggravated there. I just don't see either of those teams competing without the same pitching rotations that they've had. Now, they both have potent lineups that are capable of doing damage, but pitching is a big part in the MLB playoffs, and right now both of those teams are hurting.
Well, Arrieta is still anticipated to come back in the NLDS. Kyle Hendricks also had a 2.19 ERA in the second half. Arrieta 2.28. He was their second best pitcher in the second half. But Quintana 3.74 ERA. He's coming off of a complete game shutout in his second to last start of the season. John Lester only a 4.46 ERA, but the Cubs signed him to perform in the postseason, and we've seen over the last 2 years that he can. I really think, despite Arrieta maybe missing a start or two, the Cubs can still put it together.
That's where I'm questioning the way we saw him come back, how he spent almost a month on the DL, and then he was supposed to be good. He's looking fine. His first start back, and he re-aggravates that. I'm questioning just how long he will be out, because this is Jake Arrieta. This is a guy that you don't risk one championship for or one NLDS for. If they put him back too soon and he aggravates it again and jeopardizes the start of next season, that would be a horrible baseball move, especially since they just won a championship last year. They don't need to go back-to-back. I think they can't put too much pressure on Arrieta for sure.
Yeah, you're right, and they usually do make those managerial decisions appropriately, but like you said, he came back and he wasn't 100%. That was a bad decision by Joe Madden or whoever made that call. I mean, after that game when they interviewed him, he didn't come out of the game because of an injury. He actually, I believe he pitched twice after he came back, but after both starts, if you looked at his post-game interviews, both times he said he wasn't at 100%. You have a week or two left in the season. Why is he pitching if he's not at 100%? And that's why he re-aggravated, like you said.
Yep.
Which is weird for me. Joe Madden's one of the better managers that I've seen in my lifetime, and he's making some really questionable decisions that very well might cost them the playoffs. Arrieta, a workhorse, and in the playoffs you need all of your workhorses. You can't miss one.
Absolutely.
And for him to jeopardize like that, it shocks me.
Speaking of managers, I want to go back to Eddie's, one of your original teams, the Indians there. I think they have to be the favorite to come out of the AL.
Absolutely.
You look at maybe the Astros to compete, but they're just not as hot. The Indians are so hot right now, that 22-game winning streak, and the big difference, managers.
Yeah.
You've got Terry Francona in Cleveland, and that can be a huge difference in the postseason.
And he outmanaged Joe Madden in the World Series. As good as Joe Madden's been, he overthought that whole postseason. Pitching Chapman in Game 6. I mean, a ton of things Joe Madden did. If the Cubs ended up losing that Game 7, I mean, we'd still be talking about how Joe Madden messed up the postseason.
Yeah.
You're right.
Now, one thing I do want to say, I think the Indians are probably the easy pick in the AL, but I do really like the Astros.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't think a lot of people have accounted for, they have people on their team who have been through the postseason before. You got Carlos Beltran, who's in that clubhouse, talking to all these young guys, Carlos Correa and Jose Altuve, telling them how to win, telling them how to approach the postseason. And if that wasn't enough, they went out at the deadline, they got Justin Verlander, another guy who's had postseason success, has a ring to show for it, and will be able to tell the pitching staff, what to expect going into the postseason, how to do your schedule, and how to just pitch in the postseason. And I really think that's going to help the Astros. I still think I do have the Indians winning the AL, but I do think the Astros are going to make it a lot closer than people are thinking.
That ALCS is going to be the series to watch.
Yeah, it's going to be one to watch.
They're a complete team as well. They've got some good pitching. They've got phenomenal hitting. They're a great fielding team, very fast. All around, just a great team. And that's the only thing you can be to compete with the Indians right now.
And the reason you mentioned the Astros would go far is the exact reason I do think the Cubs will make the World Series, not necessarily win, but make it, and that's postseason experience. The Nationals have never won a playoff series. The Dodgers have had the best record in the MLB combined over the last 5 years, and they have no rings to show for it. They fall apart in the playoffs. You have a Cubs team right now with the best World Series experience you can have out of any team in the NL. So.
Now, we're gonna move the discussion along here. We did just talk about baseball as the playoffs are upon us, but yesterday was Sunday. Let's talk about football, guys. Week 4 just finished. We are 1/4 of the way through the football season. Can you guys believe it? I can't.
It's come quick. It really has.
Now, 1/4 of the way through. What are you guys looking at? Who are the contenders? Who are the pretenders?
Well, for me, you talk about college football, and they say it's the year of the quarterback in college football. This year, it's the year of the rookie in the NFL.
Absolutely.
We've had some insane performances by rookies this year. One guy who's out on the field right now, Kareem Hunt, has been mind-blowing. And the guy I've been saying since day one is born to win. Deshaun Watson is really starting to put the pieces together. I think the Texans, who might have lost to the Panthers the Patriots a couple weeks ago, who just lost to the Panthers. You talk about that dynamic. I know, Nick, you're a big Panthers guy.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Exactly. I love how the pieces are growing for Houston right now. Lamar Miller looked like this guy who was on the outs. He was fading. Everybody's saying, "Oh, Dante Foreman, he's going to come in and be there." Well, here's the big kicker for me. They're set up to be in a beautiful two-back system right now. Lamar Miller looked great this week, but you also have Dante Foreman, who could come in, get touches, and perform. Another rookie capable of stepping up. Deshaun Watson throwing the football.
If Deshaun Watson winds up struggling too, I think having 2 different running backs that you can confidently give the ball to is a great for head coach Bill O'Brien. If Deshaun Watson just isn't playing well, that's okay. We got some other guys who are going to be able to carry the offense.
Absolutely. Now, I think the Texans are for real. Unfortunately, I did bench Lamar Miller in fantasy.
Me as well.
I trust him. But I'm going to say through 4 weeks, even though they've only played 3 games they're playing right now, I'm going to say the best team, best record so far is going to have to be the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, you mentioned Kareem Hunt when he's done for that offense. The rookie, exactly. Alex Smith also 77% completion percentage. That's the most efficient in the NFL right now. And I know they don't have Eric Berry on defense, but they've only allowed 19 points a game. That's the 8th best in the NFL. They've beat a decent Eagles team. Sorry, Tim, I'm going to go decent. And they beat the Patriots. I don't think you can argue that so far the Chiefs are the best team in football.
But they're the only undefeated team left.
Exactly.
You can't make that argument.
Exactly.
There's no arguing there. I really like the defense. You talked about it. They don't have Eric Berry, but they have a ton of really solid pieces who are performing. Pass rushers, Justin Houston, of course, is the biggest name there. But a lot of guys also, big guy, I like Marcus Peters in the secondary, who got a bunch of notoriety his rookie year. He had 8 interceptions his rookie season, but has kind of faded recently. With the loss of Eric Berry in that first game, I expect Marcus Peters to step up as another impact performer, have another impact season like he had his rookie year. Yeah.
The Panthers.
One thing I just want to say real quick while we're still talking about Marcus Peters. He had 8 interceptions last year, and yeah, that's impressive, but I think that stat's a little bit misleading because if you have 8 interceptions, what does that mean? It means the opposing teams are throwing at you. They have confidence that you're not going to defend the play. Now, he was defending the play, and he had 8 interceptions, but the fact that he was being thrown at so much tells me that the guys that he's covering are open a lot, and that's why the opposing coaches are making the decision to throw his way.
Speaking of open, the Patriots receivers were open the entire game, and the Panthers were still able to come away with a 3-point win. And that, to me, is exactly what the Panthers need. I, of course, am always going to say Panthers are going to be great this year. This time I'm believing it for the first time since the Super Bowl season. The defense was so questionable. All kinds of additions. Captain Munnerlyn looks great. Darryl Worley has been way less shoddy than he was last season. James Bradbury stepped up. An injury to Kurt Coleman didn't even really phase them. And, of course, the front seven is one of the best in the league. Allowing statistically the least amount of points on the season. Haven't played a lot of great teams, but, the Patriots are one of them.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really interesting to note about Carolina, we were talking about rookies and their success. Carolina is winning without Christian McCaffrey being a huge contributor yet. I don't think he's really broken out. I think, as you said, rookies are having pretty good years so far. I think Christian McCaffrey is going to wind up being more and more involved in that offense. Right now, as you said, we saw Fozzie Whitaker this week. We saw, Jonathan Stewart. Yeah. We saw Cam Newton run a touchdown in.
Yeah, and 2 touchdown catches.
Exactly. And I think once you just start getting Christian McCaffrey involved in that screen game, I think you're just going to open more things on offense for that team.
Something I really like, his dynamic is, fantasy-wise, his numbers don't look good. They look bad. But if you watch the games, he's been doing things. Ed Dixon, a blocking tight end, had several grabs because people that should have been, covering Dixon were covering McCaffrey. He's been a distraction. And I almost prefer that as a Panther fan, that he's out somewhere and he's warranting a good defender, where that defender's not on Devin Funchess, who now has opportunities to
I don't think he's played to his complete level yet, like you guys say, but he did have over 100 total yards week 3, so I think that's when he flashed the potential. And I'm going to have to agree, I think the Panthers are good, but I think we could be overrating the Patriots win a little bit. Look, there's no denying Tom Brady's going to bounce back and bring them to the playoffs, but the Patriots are 2-2 right now, and frankly should be 1-3. They gave, Houston gave that game to them last week. I don't think the Patriots are that great of a team right now.
Defense is the worst in the league.
Exactly, worst in the league. And you mentioned contenders and pretenders. A team that people might think is a pretender that I believe is a contender are the Rams. They're 3-1 right now. Last year they had the worst offense in the NFL yardage-wise and points-wise. They have the best right now in both categories. Todd Gurley has reemerged. Jared Goff has completely emerged. He has 1,072 yards passing so far. It took him 10 games to have 1,082 last year. So, Jared Goff has been great. Todd Gurley has over 550 total yards. The Rams are a legit team.
Sean McVay and Wade Phillips have really turned that team around completely. And I hate to cut us off, guys, but we are running out of time. That's all the time we have tonight for Foco Sports Show. But tune in next Monday. We'll have another great debate for you. Have a good one, fans.